This is Kenny B with the official call, and I got my co-host sitting next to me, Robert Bird, aka the Birdman. And ladies and gentlemen, and fight fans, we got a special guest on our show. We're glad to have him on. One of the top in the business. We got Steve Weisfeld.
Yeah. It's always been an honor for me to work with both of you, and it's an honor certainly for me to be on your show. And Robert, let's do this.
For fight fans that don't know, and you should know, Steve Whitefield is one of the top judges on the planet. Let me just make it
Thank you.
plain and simple. Birdman?
Yeah, he is considered within the business probably one of the preeminent boxing judges, and has been for quite a while, and it's well earned. And while I'm on that subject, Steve, can you share with us how what led you to become or want to become a boxing judge, and how did you do that?
Well, I guess it was by accident. I remember the date, I mean, very, very well. It was January 24th, 1976. My grandmother, my mom's mom, had just passed away that day. And I remember being very sad, and my parents said, well, I could turn on the TV. I had my sister and I were very regimented. We could only watch a couple hours a week. And it just so happened that that day they had on Ron Lyle versus George Foreman. And
Wow, what a
that was the first fight, that I've ever watched. And, just like you guys just said, wow. I mean, that's what I kept saying, as a little kid watching the fight. And I'm like, this sport is just amazing. It's so exciting. And then I got hooked into boxing, and I had my, I would soon have my little index cards with me, and I really didn't know what I was doing, but I would, score the fights, mostly listening to the announcers. I hadn't gone to any, seminars as a teenager, but I always wanted the right fighter to win, certainly. And then when I was 21, I took the test to become an amateur boxing judge, and I passed that test, and I did that for 5 years after doing a little of the amateur, being an amateur apprentice. I did that for 5 years, the Empire State Games, the Diamond Gloves, the Golden Gloves, and I love doing that. And my first pro show was September 20th, 1991 at the old Ramada Hotel in New York. And I remember working with two great judges, Georgie Colon and Harold Letterman. And that was my first show. And the main event was David Taylor versus Larry Barnes. Barnes would go on to fight Felix Trinidad. And the other two judges had it 8-2 and 10-0, and I had it 9-1. And I was comfortable with my score, and I guess things continued from there. But it's just exciting being a small part of the sport.
Yeah, well, Steve, you were a little bit more ambitious because we all went through the amateur program like you did. But I had a mentor before I got started. You just picked up made your own score sheet and just started scoring it and made it happen. So that's a pretty good a testament to you.
Yeah.
Well, that's how I started. I would say later on, Harold Letterman and Tommy Kazmarek and John Potteray and a few other judges were mentors to me also.
Well, Steve, a lot of people don't really understand boxing judging. So can you give us a brief history on how judging boxing is similar to other sports?
Well, I don't know how much you guys have watched the Winter Olympics, but I would say it's not similar to any of those sports. It's not similar to the air jumping or the figure skating, but in terms of similarity, obviously the closer the sport is to boxing, the more similar the judge's role is. So if you have a combat sport round after round, judging would be more similar to that type of sport. But I would say that, regardless of the sport, all judges have to have impartiality. We have to have 100% concentration, and we have to have a knowledge of what the participant is trying to do. And I think that's of utmost importance. And that's why I said I can't judge, those Winter Olympic sports, because I really don't know what the athlete's trying to do. I know what the boxer is trying to do. The boxer is trying to do one of two things: to try to land effective punches, and that could possibly lead to the knockout, or pile up points. So in professional boxing, you really have two goals of the boxer, and it's not as easy being a judge. It's not as easy as some other sports, say basketball, where you simply have to get the ball through the hoop. As a judge, you have to fairly weigh the effectiveness of the punch versus the number of the punches and come up with a fair result. There's no mathematical formula, but experience helps. Speaking with my colleagues help. And like I said, you have to come up with a fair result for the boxer who lands more punches and the boxer who lands the more effective punches.
Right. So then what are the main criteria used for judging a professional boxing match? The main criteria used.
I would say, number one, does the punch land in the scoring area, and is it a legal blow? That's number one. That's basically the building block of our sport, because if we can't tell whether a legal punch lands, we're not going to do a good job as a judge. So that's number one. Number two is, obviously, not every punch is equal. No punches are equal. So you also have the hardness of the punch. And number three, the effectiveness of the punch. And sometimes people get confused. So if I hit you, Kenny, with my biggest right hand, say it's a hard punch, and it causes no damage, you take the shot well, and you hit me with a seemingly light punch, and I go staggering back, well, who's winning? You are, because your shot is more effective. You're closer to scoring that knockout, which is one of the goals of the boxer to begin with. So that's the number one criterion: the clean, effective, legal punch. And sometimes it could be deflected. So they're not always clean. It could be a very hard punch that lands, and it may be deflected, but that's the number one criterion. Then you have the secondary criteria, which is effective aggressiveness, defense, and ring generalship. We generally use the term control. Who's the matador and who's the bull? Who's the puppeteer and who's the puppet? Again, these are secondary criteria. We have enough to go on in a great majority of the rounds based on the punches that land as to who wins the round.
Very well. Very well.
Okay, now, Steve, that was really good.
Yeah.
You said punches that are legal that land in the boxing scoring zone. Can you tell us what the boxing scoring zone is?
Sure. I mean, it was clarified recently by the ABC guidelines. There are generally, it's the top of the head, including the ears with the imaginary line, drawn down from the sides, including the belt. A punch on the belt is usually a fair punch. A punch on the shoulder is not an illegal punch. Usually it doesn't have the same impact or effect as a punch on the chin, obviously, but that is a scoring blow. And one other thing I would mention is that if the boxer turns, some people say, well, if a boxer turns into the punch, he's causing his own foul, and that punch on the back could be a scoring punch. No, a punch on the back is not a scoring punch. A punch on the back of the head is not a scoring punch. It has to be within the scoring zone.
Yeah. Now, Steve, you earlier mentioned about being in the amateurs. Tell our fans the difference between when you were an amateur, the way you scored fights, as opposed to for the length of time that you've been a professional, how you score a fight, the difference between the two.
Well, that's an excellent question. I haven't done amateurs for a while, but this is my understanding that, and again, it goes back to the goal of the boxer. Amateur boxing is a different sport than professional boxing. It's not the goal of the amateur boxer to score a knockout. It's the goal of the amateur boxer, number one, to land quality punches. The second criteria, I believe, for amateur judging is is the boxer winning the bout based on their technique and their tactics. And then third, I believe, is competitiveness. So you have different criteria, and my understanding is that a knockdown in the amateurs is viewed as another quality punch. It's not an almost automatic 10-8 round like it is in the pros. So, that's one difference, the scoring criteria for the amateurs. Plus, I think in the amateurs and major tournaments, you have 5 judges versus 3. And, I think also in the amateurs, there's a rule that you can't go below 10-7, which is not the case in the pros.
Steve, one of the things that a lot of people, even the veteran judges, I think sometimes have an issue with. And I know the fans out there have an issue with it, but can you explain the difference between aggression and effective aggression?
Sure. You're not going to win a fight by simply being aggressive, by coming forward, throwing punches wildly. You have to, as you said, you have to be effective. You have to be doing something coming forward, and you're most effective by landing punches. Secondarily, you're effective by being the aggressor, by getting your opponent against the ropes, by cutting the ring off. But simply coming forward and wildly throwing punches is not going to win you the fight.
Well, you mentioned, Steve, in your brief definition of a 10-8, and could you explain to the fans the scoring, how the scoring works, how when a fighter goes down, how it works as far as the judges, as to how they score it from a 10? Well, just explain that, the whole scoring system.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, that's a great question. Well, let me just take a step back for a second. You said, how you want me to explain the whole scoring system? So when I started many years ago, there was a lot of confusion. You had New Jersey with the 10-point must system. You had Pennsylvania with a 5-point must system. You had New York with a round system. Maybe you had supplemental points. So these were 3 totally different scoring systems, and we're talking about adjacent states.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it wasn't until
Yeah.
the unified rules came along in 2001 where we had finally more uniformity, and you had a 10-point must system used for all championship fights, and most jurisdictions have adopted the unified rules for non-title fights. So that's just a brief background on how we got to where we are in terms of the 10-point must system.
Birdman, what if you could consistently stay in top shape?
I like that.
And we know that inflammation and injury is 90% about stress. What if you could see stress building in your cells before it promotes an injury? What if you could optimize recovery at the cellular level and identify the exact frequencies your body needs to perform at its absolute peak?
Huh? Well, I understand there's this Dr. Luba Deniger. And she's a former NASA researcher and pioneer in frequency medicine. And she reveals how AI-powered bioresonance technology can revolutionize athletic performance and recovery. From keeping performance at your all-time high to preventing career-ending injuries and seriously cutting recovery time. Now, the Monica device can change the game for elite athletes. This is the future of peak performance, and it's available today. And if you mention the official call, you also can get a discount.
Hey!
10-point must system very quickly. The winner of the round must get 10 points. The loser gets 9 or less. I'm not talking about a case where the referee takes a point away because of a foul. That could certainly be a 9-8 round or even less than that, depending upon how many points are taken away. 10-10 rounds are extremely rare. I think in the United States, in the last year, there were less than 10 even rounds scored. So it's very, very rare. A great majority of rounds are 10-10, and that goes from close to moderate, decisive. They're all 10-9 rounds, close, moderate, and decisive. Now, you could have a case where a boxer is winning the round by overwhelming dominance. The boxer is winning the round basically pillar to post, hurting his or her opponent. The opponent is doing very, very little coming back. That could be a rare 10-8 round without a knockdown. Now, you also asked, well, what happens if a boxer is knocked down? A great majority of the time, if a boxer knocks down his or her opponent one more time than the opponent, in other words, it could be 1-0 or 2-1, that's a 10-8 round. So how does the boxer who's knocked down get the point back? The boxer who's knocked down could make it a 10-9 round if, but for the knockdown, the boxer who is knocked down wins the round dominantly and decisively, hurting their opponent in the process, taking into account the entire balance of the round. And when I say balance of the round, meaning before the knockdown and after the knockdown. Now, that's very rare, but it is possible to get the point back. And the reason, that most, and I'm giving you my understanding of how most jurisdictions would like us to judge, not every jurisdiction, but that's under the ABC guidelines, and most jurisdictions follow the ABC guidelines. So that's how you get the point back, and that's how instead of a 10-8 round, it could be a 10-9 round. 2 knockdowns, generally 10-7, and under the ABC guidelines, there's no minimum. So if you, just like they say in the New York City subway, if you see something, say something. If you see a knockdown, score the knockdown. So it could be 3 knockdowns, could be 10-6. And like I said, there's no minimum.
And you mentioned, Steve, the ABC.
Yep.
Explain to people about the ABC. If you know when the ABC got started, because of like what you mentioned with the scoring, it was three different ways of how you scored until it was in 2001 worked out the 10-point must system. So the ABC, explain that.
Right. Well, right now you have Tim Shipman. He's the president of the ABC, and we have new. And when I say new, I would say it happened about a year and a half ago at the convention in Kentucky when they had adapted the new ABC guidelines for judges.
I want
And
to interrupt you, Steve. Hang
okay,
on a
I'm
second.
sorry.
Just to explain to the folks out there, the ABC is the Association of Boxing Commissions.
Yes.
So boxing,
correct.
every state has a boxing commission,
Yes.
and the ABC is a collection
Yes.
of those commissions. So I just
Thank you,
for the
Robert.
fans so
Correct.
they know.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I believe that out of the jurisdictions who were there, they voted unanimously in favor of the ABC judges guidelines. And that was, in large part due to the work of Matt Delaglio, the executive director of the New York Commission. And when I say guidelines, it's just what I say. If it doesn't override any state rules and regulations, but most jurisdictions do follow them.
Yeah. Now, Steve, you've done a lot of big fights. Explain to our fans what you do, how you prepare for a big title fight. Uh, you fly a lot, and we'll talk a little bit about your travels, but what do you do to prepare yourself the night before or the day of the fight? Prepare yourself for a big mega fight.
Yeah, and I think you always have to be prepared. You always have to practice by watching bouts on TV. There's a saying that practice doesn't guarantee success, but the failure to practice does guarantee failure. So even when I don't have a fight coming up, I'm trying to watch a fight and score the bout. And we can't do, we're not going to always improve by ourselves. So, I try to compare notes with colleagues. How did you score this fight? We're not critical of the actual judges, and we know things look different in person. But based on what we see on TV, we like to compare notes. So that's number one. We're always trying to get better. And by the way, we should be better than the judges, 40, 50 years ago. I mean, we could basically watch any fight at any time and talk about it. So we have to take advantage of the world we live in now. So that's number one. In terms of your question about how to prepare, if we know we have a big fight, I'd say something that we definitely shouldn't do is, if we know what fighters are fighting, to watch those fighters, because when you prejudge, that's another word for prejudice. So we're prejudicing ourselves to how a certain fighter did in a particular fight, and I don't think any good can come of that. However, I mean, if we know that we have a heavyweight fight coming up, I don't think it's a bad thing to watch some heavyweight fights. In terms of the day before, well, that's really the time, at least the day before, because you mentioned that we may be traveling the day before. So 2 or 3 days before, I mean, get our bag ready, make sure that, obviously we have, not only enough pens, but we have to think, where are we going? Do I have a credential that I need to wear for that state? Are there any quirks of this jurisdiction that I need to know? Just go over the rules again generally. And then the night of, I would say, get as much rest as possible. I can't overemphasize that. We all make mistakes when we're tired, and depending upon where we are, the main event could go on at 1 or 2 or 3 in the morning. So we have to be, our best self at that time. And when we do, sit down, we have to remember to focus on the boxers 100%, whether it's a title fight or whether it's a 4-round fight. And we just say to ourselves, okay, 1 round at a time, whoever wins, wins.
Very well said.
One other thing, Steve, and I harken back to, and I think you might remember, one of the other things you want to do in preparation, okay, for a fight, especially when you travel, is check the weather, because sometimes fights you think are going to be indoors or have outdoors, and so one of the things that you should also check is the weather at the location where the fight's going to be held.
Oh yeah, I agree. That's a good point. And sometimes, Bob, we're in an arena and we say, why is it so cold? And it's cold because we're sitting above ice. They put, something down, but, it's an ice hockey arena. So, always be, always expect the unexpected and try to be prepared. You're right.
Steve, why do you feel that fans have such a difficult time understanding judging boxing? Now, and I think one of the reasons, and I'll share that with you, that Kenny and I have talked about, is that they tend to watch the event with their heart and their pocketbook as opposed to their eyes. Can you share with that?
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. I think most people know, though, who's winning a fight, and I think there is, more unanimity than people would like to admit in terms of who generally won a fight. So usually it's not up for discussion, but of course, in a close fight, it's not unusual for both combatants in both camps to think that they won. But let me answer your question as to why it's difficult for the fans. And I would say that maybe I would say the first reason is that, as you guys know, we judge 1 round at a time, and we turn in our scorecards at the end of each round. We don't give our opinion as to the bout as a whole. So I could have a fight, say a 12-round fight, 118 to 110, or 10 rounds to 2. And somebody could say, Weisfeld, what were you watching? That was a close fight. And I would have to say, yeah, it was close, but it just so happened that fighter A won 10 out of the rounds and fighter B won 2 of them. I have to judge each round as if it was a separate fight. I mean, I can't worry about the fact that, fighter A won the previous round close. If I go to a seminar, nobody's going to ask me, well, I'd like to see the previous round so I can figure out who won this round, right? Every round has to be judged as a separate fight. And if you have a fight with a lot of close rounds, at the end of the fight, it could be close on the scorecards or it could be wide on the scorecard. So I think that's the first thing that people miss. The second thing is people are often swayed by what I call the dominant media. So, and most of the commentators do, a fine job. They, they describe what's happening during the fight. They entertain the audience with stories about the boxers' backgrounds, and they educate about techniques, and that's what people are listening to. I mean, people are not listening to commentators talking about a mental computer, which we use as judges, which is boxer A is up by a little bit, then boxer B comes back, and then boxer A is up by a little bit more. So, if you had a main commentator saying what was in the judge's mind throughout the entire round, that would be very boring commentary. So I don't think people would be tuning in for that. So they're not really getting a judge's perspective. I think that's the second reason. And I think the third reason is, the numbers that we see are not objective facts. So, and when I say the numbers we see in terms of punches that land, they're the opinion of two people, very, very well-versed, educated people, but sometimes they're not at the fights. And, we as judges may disagree. And it's very, very rare, I think, for a sport to show numbers where it's not an objective fact. For example, to date myself, guys, if I said 755, you guys would know, well, that's a number of home runs that Hank Aaron hit, right? I mean, that's an objective fact.
Yeah.
Everybody knows.
Yeah.
Or to use, I guess, a more recent example, Sam Darnold had 19 completions in the Super Bowl. That's an objective fact. But, if you see, fighter A landed 42 punches and fighter B landed 39 punches through the second round, maybe, maybe not. So I would say that's the third reason, that the numbers that they're getting, while it's a great tool for the fans, it's not totally objective.
Yeah, I agree with that, because I had that conversation with a number of people. Man, he must have hit him 15 times. I said, yes, but when he hit him twice, he knocked him down. So the numbers, the numbers don't necessarily tell the story.
Yeah, that's right. And then you have to, you have to take an even deeper dive, which is, he hit him. Were they legal blows? Was he, who was holding and hitting, and versus who was being held and hitting? So, you have to watch very carefully.
Yeah, quality over quantity is something else that they tend to not understand. And like you said, I think when we first began, each punch is not equal. Punches are not equal.
Yeah.
So sometimes I might hit you 3, 4, 5 times. The quantity is there, but the quality of this one punch that made you stagger, that's different. And so that would negate that all of that quantity. And I think that sometimes our fans get that mixed up, because the TV people are telling them the punch stats say ... and the punch stats are true, but the punch stats don't take into consideration the damage that the punches are doing.
Yeah, and I would also add to that, Robert, that the damage that the punches are doing, there's no question that you can tell that a lot better in person at ringside than on television. Sometimes, I'm watching around again, and it looks different, and it's from a different angle, and you don't necessarily get the effectiveness of the punch on TV, two-dimensionally, as you do when you're there in person. So that's another, I think, reason that the fans may be confused a little bit, because they're not, sometimes they don't understand, how a boxer really is affected, by a punch.
And our time is starting to run a little short, but Steve, final question: how's your daughter doing?
She's, you know what? It's funny you ask. I'm going to see her tomorrow and on her birthday. So happy
Oh,
birthday,
okay.
Danielle. Early
Yeah.
by one day. So thank you.
We
Yeah.
say happy birthday to Danielle as
Yeah.
well.
Thank you.
And Steve, I mean, the only final words I got is that we want to again thank you. I know that some of the things that you have said, maybe all of the things that you said, has been enlightening to our fans.
Yeah.
Because that's what, like Birdman said earlier, we would just want to educate our fans, and I think that you did a fantastic job in doing that.
And I agree with that because the better you understand something, I think the more you can appreciate it. And that's really what Kenny and I want for our fans to better understand the game so they can better appreciate it. And that's only going to make the sport better. And that's what we're looking for. And I know that you've been a true ambassador for the sport,
Yeah.
and we appreciate all of your efforts. And you continue to do what you do, and you do it well.
You do it well, Steve.
Well, I appreciate your kind words, and again, it was an honor to be on your show. So thank you.
Thank you, Steve, again.
Thank you, Steve.
And as we always finish our broadcast, I want to say to all our boxing fans, remember one thing: what I say, you must obey.
And Steve, you know, we done this. Let's do this.
We did this. Yes, we did this.
All right.
Take care. Be safe.
All
Take
right.
care. Be safe.
Thanks, guys.